Today we look at the Lord as our deliverer, both in the Old and the New Testament. Join us on our Jewish roots with Bible teaching from Israel with Dr. Jeffrey Seif. Join us.
To believe in the Bible is to believe in miracles. From Genesis to Revelation, the impossible became possible as God's hand moved across space and time. Land and seas were created, graves opened, water turned to wine, the sick and lame healed, the land of Israel completely restored. Past, present, and future, He's the Alpha and Omega. He is the God of miracles.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I am David Hart.
I'm Kirsten Hart.
Jeffrey Seif.
Welcome back to our series on miracles. Today's the biggie, one of the big ones, right? The Exodus. Let my people go.
Well, certainly, when you're in the Exodus story, God's showing up to Moses miraculously, raising him up to effect a great deliverance. It's certainly that whole Exodus story is the biggie in the Older Testament.
It is.
Not the only story, but the biggest.
Right. And I have to say, I think you know this, Moses is one of my favorites. That he's one of those I want to meet when I get to heaven. And to hear what he walked through in the middle of this miracle is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I like him because he reminds me of a regular guy. You know, he's struggling to come to terms with his calling, and, you know, he's not perfect. But God works His perfect will to accomplish deliverance for and through imperfect people. It's a great story. It's there in the Bible.
That's good.
We're going to hear from you right now, all the way from Israel. Here's Dr. Seif's teaching.
Sure, you're familiar with the word Arab. I have a number of Arab friends. The word Arab itself derives from a word Arabah, which speaks of the dry lands. You can imagine why I'm mentioning that at the outset. Look at where we are. We are indeed in the Holy Land, we are in the Middle East, and we are in some dry land. Even in desolate places like this, in the Bible, the Lord is known to do miracles. In fact, you might recall, it's noted in Exodus 17, verse 6. You can look it up. The people were crying out. Why? Because in the dry lands, they had parched thirst. Their tongues were dry, and they cried out, and Moses made water to come out of a rock. Now, by the way, I'm not claiming that's the rock. In fact, I'm not even here to talk about the rock, though I do want you to know that God can bring grace and refreshment to you in difficult times. But I'm looking at the beginning of the story, not something in the middle of it. In fact, earlier in Exodus, therein we're told that Moshe Rabbeinu was tending flocks in a place like this, in the wilderness. Now, there's different gradations of dry lands. There's the absolute dry, the desert lands. Wilderness goes by another word, midbar. The landscape is very difficult, but there are resources there. You just have to know how to survive in the land, something I couldn't do very long out here. But Moses knew the world out here. And once upon a time, he's out here, and I'm thinking of the story in Exodus chapter 3, where he's out in the wilderness. And there was this bush. Not only am I not claiming that's the rock behind me the water came out of, I'm not claiming that's the bush back there. You can see some green behind me, which means there's some water source there. Moses had seen a lot out here. He needed to survive, but he saw something he never saw before, a miracle. Again, a miracle is in effect a suspension of the laws of nature. He sees a bush that's burning, but it is not consumed. Now that would get anybody's attention, never mind the fact when you look at the story, there's a voice that comes out of the bush. We're told in the Bible in Exodus chapter 3 verse 2 that the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from within a bush. Angel, the word malak, from a Ugaritic verb lak, to send, there's a dispatch to him. And there's a word that's spoken that's representative of the Lord, in effect the Lord in the bush speaking to him, calling to him. And what is it that got Moses' attention? It was what we call miracle. And miracle really changed the trajectory of that man's life. It took him into things he'd never imagined. And you know, that's not just something that God does for Bible people way back then on the pages. It's done throughout the ages. People have an experience with the divine, a message of the Lord associated with supernatural. You find it in Genesis all the way through Revelation, and beyond the pages of Revelation, we find it in the world today as God is watching over His word to perform it and doing signs and wonders in the process. It's all about miracles, and I want you to know that God may have a miracle for you even yet. Our viewers send me to fascinating places here just south of the city of David, across from the Kidron Valley. We're here at a remnant of Nehemiah's wall. Stony the Road We Trod is the theme song for the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I mention that here because I thought of it just getting to this place right here. Stony is the road our camera crew trod, and it's very precarious, by the way. It's not on camera right now, but there's a precipice just right next to me. I don't want to get anywhere near it because it's a long drop to the bottom. Well, I didn't bring you here to tell you about my problems. I want to talk to you about that wall, because behind me is proof positive that supports a biblical narrative. Nehemiah, whose name means God comforts, returned to the ancestral homeland many years ago and built a wall against all odds. There were all kinds of obstacles, but he got to the task. It's right behind me. Isn't that fascinating? It's one of the beauties of biblical archaeology. It was a field that was underdeveloped till 150 or so years ago, and now you can come to the land and dig it all up, not just in Israel, but Greece and Turkey and elsewhere, and there are different ways that it corroborates the Bible story. Well, in this series in particular, I'm interested, as you know, in talking about miracles. And I like the Nehemiah text in part because there's an example of getting on board with the miracle that God is doing. Nehemiah in his day, going back to the beginning of his book, was chagrined because God had providentially afforded an opportunity for Judeans to return to the ancestral homeland, but he was chagrined because things were in a deplorable state. There was a miracle, but it wasn't being developed. He came back and got to developing it, and foremost of his tasks, at least initially, was constructing this wall behind me. Nehemiah is exemplary for a variety of reasons, one of which is his servant leadership. This is noted in chapter 2, by the way, in verse 17, when he gives voice to the fact at the outset, things are really in a bad situation, don't you see it? And indeed they did. And he says, Laku, come, vinvene et chomat, come, build the wall. There was a miracle that God had afforded the opportunity for them to return to the ancestral homeland. But there was still work to be done once they got there. I think that's where people trip up in part. Even those of us that believe in miracles sometimes neglect the fact of our own participation in what God in fact is doing. The verse begins in verse 17. He says, come on, you see the bad situation we are in. Well, from their vantage point, you know, the city was in ruins and there were enemies round about, you know, that something needed to be done. And the problem is that even those who'd returned under Zerubbabel and Ezra, the initial returnees, they kind of neglected the things of the Lord and got busy building up their own business. The capital city was in ruins still, certainly the wall around it, there was no protection. And he says, look, come on, you see the bad situation we're in, and there's that leadership, come on, let's build. It's one of the things, by the way, I like about Peter. I like Peter because he's, come on guys, he's, let's go. It takes that, you know, come on, bringing someone to church, you know, someone's in a bad way, they need to turn around in their life. It's not just telling them you need to turn around in your life, it's come on, come with me, come. lead them to a place of prayer, or just lead them to prayer. I mean, don't be ashamed to do that. He says, come, let's do this, and he finishes, so that we may no longer be a disgrace. Again, people can find themselves in abysmal circumstances, but God works through that entrepreneurial spirit. He's watching over His word to perform it, and He's working through people in the performance. I think, by the way, when I look at those wall blocks behind me, I'm glad I wasn't around to build them back then. It's tough work, arduous work. It's hot out now just sitting in the sun, telling the story, never mind making the story behind me that was made thousands of years ago. But sometimes it takes that rolling up the sleeves and get to work, and take this as a little chiding if you need it. I want you to know that, that God blesses, but He's more prone to work with people that are active in the enterprise as opposed that are passive. To underscore the point, it's not just a dogged determination and human enterprise. We're told in verse 18 of chapter 2, he says in the Hebrew, V'ragid lahem, and I told them, that is Nehemiah speaking, et yad Elohei, that the hand of my God, asher chitov, which was for good, Olai, was upon me. He gives voice to the fact it's the hand of the Lord that was upon him. Now that's what's called an anthropomorphism. That is to say, anthro, man, morphe, God. The hand of God is a poetic figure of speech. But that's what we want. I mean, miracle comes from that. We're told in the Bible that the Lord reached out and touched them. There's a miracle touch, that the hand of God involved in the enterprise. And by the way, the hand of God isn't just involved in stones and sticks and bricks and construction. Even more than all that, He's interested in building and rebuilding human lives. And I want you to know, whoever you are, wherever you are, there's nothing that can't get turned around when the hand of the Lord is upon. Bear with this brief word from Nehemiah, who said, come, let's go, God's here. I hope this serves as a little stirring if you need it. I want you to know there is great hope for the future. And the reason why that is because God does miracles even today.
I'm inspired by hearing miracles that happen in our lifetime, but miracles have been happening for a very long time, from the beginning of the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, yes. And here at Nehemiah, we're toward the end of it. I mean, certainly the Bible's a miracle story in Genesis, and here as well, they're in the land, but they're really discouraged because circumstances are abysmal, and they're really looking for heaven's help for life's unfortunate circumstances, and they reach up to God and they get it, but they gotta reach into themselves and get up to go after it as well. That's part of the story
Which
here.
I applaud you, because that spoke to me in your teaching. You're talking about Nehemiah's participation. And if I can just take one little second, my little journey, I had foot surgery this past summer. And then a month ago, I broke my big toe on the foot surgery foot. But through that, I discovered that I have high blood pressure. That's something that I didn't know. And Jeff was teaching about we have to do our part in God's miracle. So I learned that I have high blood pressure. I could pray that God take my blood pressure away, but I need to do my part. I need to eat right. I need to do heart-healthy activities. And so interesting, how we try to make the Bible stories relate to us. Yeah. I relate to that part. I need to do my part.
Yeah, and we do want to relate to the Scripture. That's how we find healing and hope and help in it. And in the context in Nehemiah's day, people were living in grief and shame. They were really downcast because of their abysmal circumstances. And sometimes less than hope for circumstances prompts us to dig a little deeper, to look up to the Lord a little longer, and we find new things, new life forms come out of the decay and the despair. That's what happened here.
Not always an instant miracle, that we have to really trust the Lord and pray about his miracles for us.
That's right, you know, and I think that, I mean, there's different kinds of miracles in the Bible. They're done different ways, and not all of it is instant. It can be incremental. You know, I think of the time in Caesarea Philippi, just before Peter first acknowledges that Jesus is the Messiah. There's a miracle there with vision, where the Lord does a vision miracle, but they see fuzzily. The man says, "What do you see?" "Well, they look like trees walking." And then he does another, and then he sees clearly. In other words, it's incremental. That's what's happening here in the Nehemiah story. This thing is pacing out, and individuals are beckoned to reach within and participate in the restoration.
And I think there's something in us, there's a satisfaction, should I say, of doing what we can. I mean, God could have built Nehemiah's wall. He could have, bam, and the wall's up. But our participation in that, with God's help, that combo, there's something about it, and it gives us strength.
You're right, but I get it. You know, people turn to the Lord for problems because they've been wrestling with it and haven't found a solution. They just want out, you know, and so the story of, well, you have to walk this out is not what we want to hear by nature, but God watches over His word to perform it, and He has His way of using trials to build us into what He wants us to be.
I wonder how many times we've given up right before that miracle takes place. Have you ever experienced that in your life?
There's a story about a swimmer in the fog who gave up, and they were right up against the finish line and didn't realize it. And that's what I think of when I hear a story like that.
But I love your teaching on Nehemiah's wall, that God can do instantaneous miracles, and we have that in our program. We're going to be talking about that in our series. Right. But today, we had to do our part. Like I'm doing my part with high blood pressure.
Yeah.
No sugar for a month. I'm still alive.
In Nehemiah's world, people are going to mock you people. What do you think you're doing? This is impossible. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. No, it's not. God is on the throne.
That's right.
Good word.
We'll be right back. Our resources this week: Glory, the Future of the Believers. In this booklet, Zola Levitt explains the coming rapture, our time in heaven, the kingdom on earth, and eternity. Call 1-800-WONDERS or visit us at levitt.com. Remember to connect with us on social media for so much extra content. Find us at Our Jewish Roots.
If you've heard the term snail mail, that simply means mail that comes into your mailbox the old-fashioned way. We have 2 monthly periodicals, the Levitt letter and the personal letter, that come to your home. You can hold them in your hand, read them, and find out insights of Israel, what's happening right now today from our friends. We call it boots on the ground. They are in Israel, bringing the current news to you. Sign up at levitt.com for those 2 periodicals.
And now Dr. Seif interviews the owner of Sarel Tours. His name is Samuel Schmaja. Let's go there now.
Sam Schmaja, it is such an honor to be with you personally. And I mean that sincerely.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you.
You know, second generation Messianic Jew, born and raised in Israel. And you're involved in a lot of things in Israel, correct? I'd like you to speak to ways that you perceive God to have been involved with you as you've made your journey through life, or anything that smacks of miracle that you think's important.
First of all, thank you for having me on your show. When we talk about miracles in Israel, so the subject in Israel of miracle is not if you believe in miracles or if you don't believe in miracles. The question is, can you live without miracles? If you live in the Middle East, and if you see what's going on in Israel, but if you believe that there is a God, you have to believe in miracles. Because if you don't believe in miracles, you went somewhere wrong, because you cannot survive in this country. We as Israel cannot survive without a miracle of God. I believe that the whole return of the Jewish people is a miracle. I believe sustaining 70-something years here in the land, soon 75 years in the land, is a miracle. When you walk on the streets of Israel, and you look around and you see where the Israeli society is, where Israeli economy is, where is the Israeli technology, everything about Israel is a miracle. You know, I grew up in a Messianic family. Both my parents came from Tunisia, North Africa. They started the Messianic movement in this country with some other brothers and sisters.
So, original pioneers.
Original pioneer. Both my parents, we're talking about the end of the 50s, 1956, they came here. My father was a real pioneer, and for those who know what a pioneer means, pioneer is somebody that when there is a wall and there is a door, he chooses to go head first through the wall, even if there is a door, because he believes he needs to get to the other side.
Yet now there's a movement of Messianic Jews in Israel. Back in his day, you could count them on your hands.
Yeah, when my parents came, there were maybe 20 Jewish believers in this whole country. So growing up in this environment and seeing where the movement is today, I can tell you that's another miracle.
So you've discussed the emergence of the modern nation state and pivoted to the emergence of Messianic Jewish experience in the state. Miracles both in their own right, to be sure. What about your own life? What resonates with you when you personally think of miracle?
When I look upon my life, it's a story of miracle combined with the grace of God. As I said, I grew up in this house. I grew up dyslexic. I could hardly spell my name. My father forced me to stay in school just for the sake of staying in school. I graduated, but he put me in a class of girls because I was not good in anything, of tourism. But I flunked. So I went to look for a job as a tour operator. Everywhere that I went, they asked me, can you write in English? I said, no. I went through all the agencies in Israel, in Jerusalem, till I got to a very small, tiny agency, a three people agency. And I went to the guy and I say, I came to look for a job, but I'll work for you for free. And if I'll make money, we'll share the profit. He looked at me and says, are you sure? Because there's no free meals in Israel. What do you mean you'll work for me for free? So I worked for this guy for free for 2 years. After 7 years, my department became bigger than his office. So that was a miracle. It's like, I cannot tell you, I didn't have any business plan, I didn't know what I was doing, but everything I touched turned into gold. It's really the favor of God. It's a miracle. After being with the gentleman for 7 years, he came to me and he says, I think it's time for you to open your own company.
You're a guy that couldn't put a sentence together, couldn't get a job. You're one of the major tour operators, Sarel Tours, in Israel. Beyond that, in construction, you're putting a luxury 5-star hotel up right by where the Mount of Beatitudes is. Beyond, you've done construction for congregations. You pastor a congregation. People can see you weekly on TBN. What's the name of your program?
Insight, Israel and the Middle East.
Insights, Israel and the Middle East. You've gone from not being able to read communication to being a major communicator. You went from not being able to get a job in a tour company to being the president of the biggest one, and other things on top.
That's why I believe in miracle.
Yeah.
For me, I don't believe in miracle. I want to correct it. I live the miracle.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave my house without a miracle. That's how much I believe in miracles. And I want to encourage our viewers, those that watch us, those that struggle, those that are feeling that they're alone, that they are in this valley or in this tunnel. There is a light in the end of the tunnel. God put you, God called you, He will carry you through. And we have to believe, because we believe in a living God that makes miracles every day. Don't leave your house without a miracle, expecting to receive a miracle.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a turnaround life is worth 1,000 sermons on God's potential for turning around a life. And it's such a wonderful story. Thank you for taking the time to come and share it with me and the world.
Thank you.
We've made a lot of friends since we've been going to Israel. Dr. Seif, I believe Sam Shmaja, is that how you say it?
Shmaja, yeah, Shmuel, or Shmuley as he's called.
There you go.
He comes from a pioneering family. His father was one of the first. He's second generation Messianic Jew in Israel.
And that is such an honor. You've been going to Israel for years and meeting people there. We want to give you the opportunity to come with us and meet some of these people that you're seeing on our program. We go there, we get in the land. Go to our website, levitt.com, for more information about our tours.
Yes. And if you can't go there, we'll bring it to you. Please help us do it. We go coast to coast, actually around the world on Christian television, and it's expensive. Lord loves a cheerful giver. Please, I know you love the Lord, or you wouldn't be watching Christian television. I know you love the Jews, or you wouldn't be watching us. Please get behind and help. I believe the Lord will bless you in so doing.
And it's a miracle that we have been on air for about 40 years. That's incredible. What a gift that people have made this possible as we're in this series of miracles.
Good point.
So much more in this series, The God of Miracles. It's time to go right now.
Yes, it is. Until next week, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
See the Holy Land. Does it make our heart leap up with joy? Sing with us a hymn unto the King of Israel. Brothers, we are needing your mighty arm. Sisters, we are needing your love. Israel, by divine right, God is calling us home. Israel, by divine right, our God is calling us home.
Join us right now for additional content that is only available on our social media sites. Visit our website, levitt.com, for the current and past programs, the television schedule, tour information, and our free monthly newsletter, which is full of insightful articles and news commentary. View it online, or we can ship it directly to your mailbox every month. Also on our website is the online store. There you can order this week's resource, or you can always give us a call at 1-800-WONDERS. Your donations to Zola Levitt Ministries helps us to support these organizations as they bless Israel. Please remember, we depend on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.